everybody, it's Natalina here coming to you live from Natalina's Kitchen. I have been running Natalina's Kitchen Italian cooking school since 2011. I've been taking groups to Italy since 2015. We're all about homemade food here, mostly classic Italian and authentic Italian. So today we are making a very simple, easy, no knead focaccia. And I'll tell you, it's my go-to, even though it is so simple. I mean, a 10-year-old could make it, okay? That's how simple it is. Even though it is so simple, it's one of the bread or focaccia recipes that I use the most just because it is so simple. The results are fantastic and people are always impressed by the results given how easy it is. Okay, so let's get started. First off, flour, okay? So I have got 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour here. Now, like I said, in my normal authentic Italian classes, we get into specialty flours, but not this time. This isn't the time or place for that. We are talking about basics. So everyone should have all-purpose flour, okay? So we've got 1.5 cups. I'm referring to my recipe because I don't know it off by heart, although I've made it a million times. So it could be bleached, it could be unbleached. I mean, if you have bread flour, that's fantastic. But I really do want to simplify this and tell you that you can still get very good results with our all-purpose flour. Okay, then I've got for my batch here 1 teaspoon of traditional dry yeast. So traditional dry yeast comes in the little pouches in the grocery store. In my grocery store, it comes in 3 pouches attached or in loose in a jar or a big Tetra Pak container. Okay, so I've already pre-measured this out to 1 teaspoon. All right, then I've got salt. This is not special salt, it's just table salt. And what do we got here, Laura? We have got, okay, so 1.5 teaspoons of salt all ready to go. And then I've already pre-measured my water. I've got some warm water pre-measured 1.5 cups in my little jug there. You could use traditional yeast or instant yeast or fast acting yeast. And that's what I have here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the batch with traditional yeast, and then we're going to go through with the quick yeast because it's a little bit different, okay? And I'm going to have Laura mix that up, and you're going to see how quick this comes together. So I've got a large bowl, and then to that bowl, I'm going to add my pre-measured warm water. Now, I don't get a thermometer in there or anything. It's just warm, and I'm warm to the touch, okay? Just from the tap. So I'm going to put that in my bowl. I'm going to tip it a little bit so now you can see. And then to that, I'm going to add the traditional yeast, and we're just going to dissolve that. That might take a few minutes. So while that's dissolving in there, we're going to get Laura started next door because this will take a few minutes. Okay, so I am going to switch over to this one. So Laura has a large bowl. She has the exact same measurement of flour, but this time she's going to start with the flour in the bowl. She's going to pour that in. Now, with the instant yeast or fast rising yeast, it's also called, it's very, very tiny and it's more concentrated. Okay, so there's only 3/4 of a teaspoon here. So if you're using the instant or the quick rise yeast, you're only going to use 3/4 teaspoon and you're going to add it to the flour. Okay, so the difference is the traditional yeast, as we've done here, it needs to be dissolved in water. The instant one does not. Okay, so Laura, why don't you grab your wooden spoon? You can mix that in. We've got the exact same measurement of salt, which is, again, 1.5 teaspoons. It's just regular table salt. So Laura, I'm going to just toss that in there for you. As the name implies, this is an instant yeast, so it's more concentrated. It starts to work a little more quickly. So it actually comes together a little quickly because we don't have to wait for it to dissolve like this one. So we're actually going to add the water right in there. So it's the exact same measurement. I know it's a different size little jug, but it's the same measurement. It's 1.5 cups of warm water, just warm to the touch. Okay, Laura, so I'm going to pour that in for you. And all she's going to do is mix that in. So you can show them. If it gets to the point that you're having trouble mixing it with the spoon, just get your hands in there. I find your hands are the best tools, okay? It's going to be wetter than a traditional dough, okay? So no knead breads typically are wetter. And the whole idea is it's a softer dough, so you can't actually physically knead it. And I mean, when we're kneading traditional breads, it's a lot more work and it takes a lot more time. So while Laura's getting her hands in there just to get all the flour wet, we're going to switch gears now to this one, and you can see it's now dissolved. So I'm just going to give it a little stir. Okay, very simple. And I'm just going to dump that flour in, the all-purpose flour. I'm going to dump the salt in. Okay, and then same thing. I've got a spatula here, so you can use a spatula or you could use a wooden spoon as you wish. or you could use your hands. So you can see it's very, very wet, and it's really not possible to knead this dough. It's so wet, okay? If it is still wet, there is a little bit of room after the 2 3/4 cup, or you could add another 1/4 cup of flour if it's really, really wet. And the reason for the variable there is depends how dry your room is. Flour will naturally withhold humidity. So where I am here, we've got indoor heating, and it's still just basically early spring here where we are in Canada. So the heat has been running, so it is quite dry. So I shouldn't need to add any more flour, and I don't think I do. But if you're in a part of the world where it's not super dry, it's a little bit more humid, it might be super, super sticky, and you might want to add just a little bit more of that flour. You don't have to add it all, though. Only add as much as you need. And really, that's it. Like that is all we do to this point. Laura, yours is there too. Okay, so basically to this point, all you're going to do is cover this with some plastic wrap. So Laura, I've got a piece of plastic wrap for you there, and I've got one for me here. And then you're going to just put a tea towel on this and let it rest until it doubles in size. And that's typically about an hour. Okay, next step now. So we're going to fast forward and imagine that your dough has now rested for an hour. It's doubled in size, and I want to show you. So this is the one that I did just about an hour ago. So you can see that it's gotten nice and airy. But see how wet it is? It's extremely wet, and I don't want you to think it's impossible to form when it is so wet, but you can see all those lovely air bubbles in there, and that's exactly what we want. And that's why this focaccia is so successful, because it is really light and airy. So next step, what we're going to do is each batch of this makes two. It makes 2 dinner-sized plates that are about 1.5 inches to 2 inches thick, depending on how big you make it. If you want it thicker and smaller, you could make one. I typically do like a traditional focaccia, which is a little bit lower, like a flatbread. But you know what? If you don't have a lot of bread in the house and you're going to have this take the place of bread these days, if you can't get out to the store, you could actually do it a little thicker, and then you could actually slice it, use it for sandwiches or stuff it, etc. Okay, so if you have parchment paper or like a silicone mat, that would work perfect for this. If you have neither, you could actually just do this on some tin foil. So what we're going to do is Laura and I both are going to put some olive oil on our hands. Now, if you don't have any olive oil, just use vegetable oil. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather up this dough, and I'm just going to kind of randomly eyeball it in half. I'm going to give half to Laura and half to myself. There you go. And oil is your friend here, okay? Because it is really sticky. I'm actually going to get a little bit more. And we're going to coat it in oil. So I want you to cover it with oil, and then all of a sudden that'll give you a lot more freedom to move it. Okay, so we're going to stretch it a little bit into a circle, Laura, like this, and then down onto our parchment. I'm going to get rid of the spool. Again, anytime you're handling the dough, you want to make sure you have some oil. Okay, so Laura, if you need more oil, and all I'm doing is I'm stretching it out to about a dinner plate size. Okay, and you can see I'm spinning it, okay, and the oil is keeping it from sticking. So far you can see just how really, really simple this is. You want this to be coated with oil so that when we put our plastic wrap on it to let it rest for the second rise, that it doesn't stick, okay? So this now is gonna rest for another 20 minutes for the second rise, okay, at least 20 minutes. And then during this time, you're gonna wanna preheat your oven. So you're going to preheat your oven to 450 degrees. And now while this is resting, I'm going to probably rest it a little bit shorter just to manage our time here. But there's a number of things that I want to share with you. So this is going to rest. While this is resting, I want to tell you about your options to bake this off. Okay, so a couple things. Number one, if you want to do it on a pizza stone, and you have a pizza stone, which I just have a plain stone here, that's a great idea to do it on a stone, but I'm just going to share a few tips, okay? You want to put the stone in the oven when the oven's cold, and you want to heat the oven to 450. And the reason you do that is when you heat the stone in the oven, then when the oven beeps and it's at the temperature, not only is the oven 450, but the actual stone is 450 as well, okay? So that stone is really good and hot. It's going to make a really nice base on the bottom of your focaccia. Okay, now imagine that is in our oven and it's heating. Okay, you're gonna need a pizza peel to transfer your dough to the stone so you don't burn yourself. Okay, so when it's time, you're gonna take a pizza peel and you're gonna just simply put that under. You're not going to have the saran wrap or the plastic wrap on here, obviously. And you're going to slide that into the oven. Okay, so you don't burn yourself, and you'll also need the peel to remove it. Okay, so that's just if you have a stone. You don't need a stone to do this. You can just do it on a cookie sheet like Laura is here. Okay, so if that were the case, we're just going to put the entire thing in the cookie sheet when it's time to go. Okay, but I want to talk about toppings now while we were letting this rest. Okay, so we're just taking advantage of the little bit of lag time. So there's quite a number of things you can do. A classic focaccia just has olive oil and salt on it, typically sea salt, but if you don't have sea salt, you can just use regular table salt. Can you pass me that one? So this is sea salt here. Okay, so if this was a classic, I would now, after it rested for 20 minutes, I would heavily brush this with olive oil or vegetable oil, and I would sprinkle some of the sea salt. Okay, if you have flake salt, which is what this is, that's great. It's just a little coarser. It'll give a nice little salty little bite on that. Okay, there's a couple other things you can do too, and this is one of my favorite things to do, is to take little grape tomatoes and actually, before it rests the second time, just place these randomly in here and let the dough kind of rise around those. Okay, this is very typical in southern Italy, especially in the region of Puglia, which is the heel of Italy. Okay, so we've got our olive oil on there. We're actually going to put a little bit more on this one too. Okay, and then I'm going to sprinkle some salt. If you want to put oregano, dried oregano on here, that's another option as well. If you don't like it, just leave it out. But typically I would put the salt and the olive oil for sure. And I'm just going to add a little bit of oregano. And then we'll talk about some other options here. Okay, so there we go. And then I'm going to cover this one up and let it finish this little rise. And then what we're going to do with Laura's is, I have another thing here, is I have some onions. This is more typical of the Liguria region of Italy, which is the west coast of Italy. And these are sweet onions that I've just sliced really thin. You could use a yellow onion, you could use a Vidalia onion, whatever you have, okay? And then the idea here is anytime you're using something like this that has potential to burn, because this is going to caramelize and they're going to get really sweet and tasty while they bake, it's a really good idea to just put a little bit of olive oil or vegetable oil on this. And then, Laura, can you just coat those all in oil? That'll prevent them from burning. Okay, and that's another tip that I use when I'm adding fresh herbs. Rosemary is beautiful, one of my favorite things to do. So you would remove the small little stems from the rosemary, and then I would coat it with a little bit of olive oil. I would do the olive oil, the salt, and then I would scatter the rosemary on there as well. Okay, Laura, so you can go ahead and do that. Actually, you should do your salt maybe first too. Okay, so basically that is it. This is super, super easy. And you can see this has started to rise already around it. I'm not going to have you wait while I bake this. I'm going to be baking probably both of these off in the next 10 minutes, and then I'll post them on the Facebook page. This recipe is actually in my cookbook. So this is Natalina's Kitchen, Bringing Homemade Back. This is available online on the website. We're shipping across Canada and the US right now. And then one more final ask, if you enjoy these, and we do enjoy doing them because it gets us in the kitchen. And I mean, if we're cooking for our family anyways, Laura, we may as well cook for our viewers at home. But just one final ask, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, please reach out to me if there's something that you'd like to learn. So thank you so much for joining us today. See you in the kitchen. Thank you.